The stars filled the observation windows of Mars Command Station like scattered diamonds on black velvet. Jiwan sat at her communication console, her fingers moving across the holographic displays as she monitored the dozens of channels that connected humanity's scattered colonies. It was late in her shift, and the coffee beside her had gone cold hours ago. Most nights were quiet. Most nights nothing happened. Tonight was different. A strange signal appeared on her screen, pulsing with an urgency that made her heart race. The frequency was unlike anything in the human database. It was clearly artificial, clearly intelligent, but definitely not human. Jiwan's hand hesitated over the alert button for just a moment before she pressed it. Within seconds, alarms echoed through the station. Hyunwoo arrived at the linguistics lab before anyone else. He had been asleep when the alert came through, but years of training had taught him to move fast when it mattered. The signal was already playing on the lab's main speakers when he entered. It sounded like music mixed with static, beautiful and haunting and desperately sad. He pulled up his analysis programs and got to work. The translation took 3 hours. 3 hours of comparing patterns, running algorithms, and making educated guesses about an entirely alien language structure. When the computer finally displayed the message in Korean, then English, Hyunwoo felt his blood run cold. He read it twice to make sure he understood correctly, then reached for the emergency communication line to Earth. The message was simple and terrible. An alien species called the Valorians was dying. Their world was under attack by something called the Krellith Dominion. They had no weapons, no armies, no way to defend themselves. They were scholars and artists, builders and dreamers, and now they were victims. The message had been broadcast in every direction. A bottle thrown into the cosmic ocean with one desperate hope, that someone somewhere might hear and care. Fleet Admiral Minho stood in the Situation Room deep beneath Geneva, surrounded by holographic displays showing star charts and fleet positions. The translated message played again, and the room fell silent when it finished. Around the table sat the most powerful leaders of Earth: presidents, prime ministers, military commanders, and diplomatic officials. They all looked at Minho, waiting for the military perspective. The signal originated from a star system approximately 40 light-years from our furthest colony, Minho said, his voice calm despite the gravity of the situation. At maximum jump speed, we could reach them in 3 months. The question is whether we should. Ambassador Yuna stood up, her eyes blazing with conviction. How is this even a question? We have the power to help and they have no one else. What does it say about humanity if we hear a cry for help and do nothing? It says we're practical, countered General Richards from the European Defense Force. We know nothing about this Krellith Dominion. They could have weapons we can't imagine. They could have fleets that make ours look like toys. We could be sending our people to die for strangers we've never met. We were strangers once, Yuna replied quietly. Strangers to each other, fighting and killing over pieces of Earth. We learned to be better. We learned that being human means protecting those who can't protect themselves. The debate raged for hours. Some argued for caution, for sending scouts first, for gathering more information. Others argued that delay meant death for the Valorians, that every hour spent debating was an hour they suffered alone. In the end, it was Minho who cut through the arguments with a simple statement. I've read Earth's history, he said. Every time we ignored genocide, every time we stood by while innocents died, we regretted it. We built monuments and swore never again, and then we did it again. We have a chance to actually mean those words. I recommend we send the fleet. The vote was close, but it passed. Humanity would answer the distress call. Captain Doyen received his orders while his ship, the TDF Indomitable, was docked at Luna Station for routine maintenance. He read them 3 times, then called his senior officers to the briefing room. They assembled quickly, his tactical officer, his chief engineer, his medical staff, his marine commander. When everyone was seated, Doyen activated the holographic display and showed them the Valorian message. We're going to war, he said simply. Not for territory, not for resources, not for any reason humanity has ever fought before. We're going to war because someone asked for help. Marine Commander Soman studied the star charts with a critical eye. What do we know about the enemy? Almost nothing, Doyen admitted. They're called the Krellith Dominion. They've conquered at least 17 other species according to the Valorian message. They're significantly more advanced than the Valorians, but we don't know how they compare to us. So we're flying blind into a combat situation against an unknown enemy to save aliens we've never met, Soman said. She was quiet for a moment, then she smiled. Sounds like a typical human plan. When do we leave? The fleet assembled over 3 weeks. 12 warships, the largest battle group humanity had ever sent beyond its own territory. Supply ships loaded with ammunition, spare parts, medical supplies, and enough food to last 6 months. Troop transports filled with Marines who volunteered for a mission that might have no return. And at the center of it all, the Indomitable, with Captain Doyen standing on the bridge watching his crew prepare for the unknown. Jiwon transferred to the Indomitable as part of the expanded communications team. As the person who first detected the signal, she felt responsible for seeing this through. She stood at her new station, running diagnostics and checking systems, trying not to think about the fact that she might have started a war. The departure was broadcast across Earth and all its colonies. Billions watched as the fleet formed up in high orbit, their hulls gleaming in the sunlight. No one knew what would happen next. No one knew if the ships would return, but everyone knew that humanity had made a choice, had drawn a line in the cosmic sand and said, "This far and no further." Admiral Minho gave the order from Mars Command, his voice steady and clear. "Fleet, this is Command. You are cleared for jump. Bring our people home. Bring the Valorians hope. Show the galaxy what humanity stands for." Doyen looked around his bridge one last time, seeing the determination on every face. Then he gave the order that would change everything. "All ships jump on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark." Space twisted, light bent, and the fleet vanished into the dark. The journey to Velor Prime had begun. The jump lasted 3 months, but for the crew it felt like both an eternity and an instant. Ships in jump space existed in a strange state between dimensions, where time moved differently, and the human mind struggled to process the experience. When the Indomitable finally emerged back into normal space at the edge of the Valorian system, Captain Doyen was grateful just to see stars again. What those stars revealed made him wish they had stayed in jump space. Sensor Officer Junho's voice cracked as he read the displays. "Captain, I'm detecting massive debris fields in orbit around all 4 outer planets. Thousands of objects, most of them artificial. Station fragments, ship hulls, what looks like habitats. Sir, these weren't military targets. These were homes." Doyen stood from his command chair and walked to the main view screen. The computer enhanced the image, showing the wreckage in terrible detail. Broken metal twisted like paper. Sections of hull that had been homes to families now tumbled through space, exposed to vacuum. Here and there, bodies floated among the debris, frozen and still. "Take us deeper into the system," Doyen ordered. "Full sensor sweep. I want to know what we're facing." The fleet moved inward, past the dead outer worlds toward the 3rd planet from the sun, Velor Prime. According to the distress signal, it was the Valorian homeworld, the center of their civilization. As they approached, the devastation only grew worse. Junho's hands shook as he worked his console. "Sir, I'm detecting active combat. 3 massive ships in high orbit over Velor Prime. They're bombarding the surface with some kind of plasma weapons. The energy readings are off the scale." The view screen shifted to show the enemy. The Krelith warships were enormous, easily 3 times the size of the Indomitable. Their hulls were dark and angular, covered in armor plating that looked thick enough to shrug off anything humanity could throw at them. As the crew watched, one of the ships fired down at the planet below. A beam of white-hot energy lanced through the atmosphere, and somewhere on the surface another city died. "How many ships do we have against 3 of theirs?" Tactical Officer Mirai asked quietly. 12 against 3, Doyen replied. "But size isn't everything. Ready all weapons. Prepare to engage." Before he could give the order to attack, Jiwon's voice came over the comm. "Captain, I'm receiving a transmission from the planet. It's weak, but it's definitely using the same patterns as the original distress signal. Someone down there knows we're here. Put it through." A new voice filled the bridge, speaking in the musical language of the Valorians. The translation appeared on the screens a moment later. "Unknown vessels, please respond. We are the Valorian Defense Council. If you are here to help, we have a shuttle launching from our last orbital platform. It carries our diplomatic representative. Please, we are dying." Doyen didn't hesitate. "Tell them we'll provide cover. Squadron Leader Hana, launch all fighters. Get that shuttle to us safely." Hana was already running toward the hangar bay before the order finished. She had been a pilot for 6 years, had flown in combat simulations hundreds of times, but this would be her first real battle. She pushed the fear down deep and focused on the familiar routine. Suit up, system check, launch sequence. Her fighter shot out of the Indomitable's hangar with 11 others following close behind. The Valorian shuttle was small and battered, limping away from a burning orbital platform that was breaking apart under Krellith fire. Hana's sensors showed Krellith fighters moving to intercept it. She pushed her throttle to maximum. "All fighters engage at will," she ordered. "Don't let them reach that shuttle." The space between the human fighters and the Krellith ones closed in seconds. Hana had time to notice that the enemy fighters looked like predatory insects, all sharp edges and aggressive angles. And then the battle began. Her first missile hit a Krellith fighter dead center. The enemy ship exploded in a ball of fire and debris. Her second missile missed, but her railgun found its target, punching holes through armor until something critical failed. 3 seconds, 2 kills. The Krellith had never fought humans before. They were learning now. The Valorian shuttle made it to the Indomitable's hangar with Hana's squadron providing cover the entire way. As soon as it was aboard, Doyen ordered the outer doors sealed and headed down to meet their guests. Marine Commander Somin and a squad of her soldiers were already there, weapons ready just in case. The shuttle's hatch opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure. The being that stumbled out looked nothing like a human. It stood on 4 legs with 2 upper limbs that might have been arms. Its body was covered in a kind of shell, like an insect's carapace, but its face had large expressive eyes that looked terribly human in their fear and hope. It took 3 steps, tried to speak, and collapsed. The medical team rushed forward. Dr. Jian had been briefed on Valorian biology as much as possible from the database they had received, but theory was different from practice. She scanned the alien with her medical tools, seeing signs of exhaustion, malnutrition, and something that looked like radiation poisoning. "Get him to medical bay," she ordered. "Carefully. His physiology is fragile." The Valorian diplomat's name was Thelis. When he woke up in the medical bay an hour later, surrounded by human doctors and strange equipment, he should have been terrified. Instead, tears rolled down his alien face as he whispered the first words of thanks his species had spoken to another in 2 years. Intelligence Officer Tae-hyung spent the next 6 hours in intensive debrief with Thelis, learning everything the Valorian could tell them about the Krellith Dominion. The picture that emerged was grim. The Krellith were conquerors, pure and simple. They had built their empire over centuries, crushing any species they encountered. They didn't negotiate, didn't compromise, didn't show mercy. To them, other species were either slaves or obstacles to be eliminated. "How many species have they conquered?" Tae-hyung asked. 17 that we know of, Thelis replied weakly. "Perhaps more. They do not share information with those they invade. We only learned of others through archaeological records they left behind." "What about their military capabilities?" "Overwhelming. Their ships are massive and heavily armored. Their weapons are beyond anything we ever developed. But it is their soldiers that truly terrify. They are bred for war, enhanced genetically to be perfect killers. A single Krellith warrior can fight 100 of my people and win." Tae-hyung made notes, his mind already working on tactical assessments. "How long have they been attacking your world?" 2 years. They came without warning, without communication. They destroyed our defense satellites in the first hour. Since then, they have systematically destroyed our cities, our infrastructure, our culture. We have nowhere left to run." Thelis looked at Tae-hyung with those large, desperate eyes. "Can you help us? Can anyone help us?" Before Tae-hyung could answer, alarms screamed through the ship. The Krellith had detected the human fleet. Captain Doyen was back on the bridge in seconds. The view screen showed the 3 massive Krellith warships turning away from the planet and moving toward the human fleet. They came slowly, confidently, like predators approaching prey they knew couldn't escape. A transmission came through, harsh and guttural, even through the translation software. "Unknown species. You have entered Krellith territory. Surrender your vessels immediately or be destroyed. This is your only warning." Every eye on the bridge turned to Doyen. He stood tall, his jaw set with determination. He thought about the debris fields they had passed, the burning cities below, the desperate diplomat who had collapsed in their hangar. He thought about all the species the Krellith had crushed, all the civilizations they had ended. "Open a channel," he ordered. The channel opened. Doyen spoke clearly, his voice carrying across space to the Krellith warships. "This is Captain Doyen of the Terran Defense Fleet. We received a distress call from the Valorian people. We're here to answer it. Leave this system immediately or face the consequences." There was a moment of silence. Then the Krellith commander laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "You dare threaten us? Your ships are insects. We will crush you and add your species to our collection. Open fire. The 3 Krellith warships launched their attack. Plasma cannons lit up the dark with beams of superheated matter. The Indomitable's shields flared as the first impacts hit. All ships, Doyen ordered, his voice calm despite the chaos. Attack pattern Delta. Show them what humans can do. The battle for Velor Prime had begun. The first battle lasted 4 hours and changed everything. The Krellith thought they knew about war. Their massive warships had armor thick enough to withstand direct hits from weapons that had shattered entire fleets. Their plasma cannons could melt through shields that had protected civilizations for centuries. They had never lost a battle, never even been challenged by a species that dared fight back. The Krellith commander expected this engagement to last minutes. The human ships were smaller, faster, and refused to fight the way victims were supposed to fight. They didn't form a defensive line and wait to be destroyed. Instead, they split into groups of 3 and attacked from different angles, their movements coordinated with a precision that seemed almost telepathic. When the Krellith ships turned to face one group, another would strike from behind or below, railguns hammering at the same spot on the armor until it cracked. Captain Doyen watched from the bridge of the Indomitable as his tactical plan unfolded. Target their engine ports. Those big ships need enormous power to move. Take out their engines and they're just floating targets. The destroyer Guangzhou slipped under the belly of the nearest Krellith warship, so close that the enemy's weapons couldn't track it. Its railguns fired in a continuous stream, punching holes through the armor plating near the engine section. The Krellith ship tried to rotate, tried to bring its weapons to bear, but human ships were built for speed and agility. By the time it turned, the Guangzhou was already gone, and the cruiser Daejeon was hitting it from another angle. Tactical Officer Mirai coordinated the attack patterns, her fingers flying across her console. The middle ship's shields are weakening. Concentrate fire on Section 4. 6 human ships focused their weapons on a single point. Railgun rounds, missiles, and energy beams converged on one spot. The Krellith shields flared, held for a moment, then collapsed. The armor beneath began to glow red, then white. Then it failed completely. A missile slipped through the gap and exploded deep inside the enemy ship. The Krellith warship shuddered, secondary explosions rippling along its hull. It began to list, trailing atmosphere and debris. The other 2 Krellith ships saw their companion crippled, and for the first time in their species' military history, they retreated. They jumped out of the system, leaving their damaged companion behind. The human fleet surrounded the crippled Krellith ship and forced its surrender. When the surviving crew evacuated in escape pods, they looked at the human warships with something new in their eyes. Fear. Admiral Minho received the battle report at Mars Command and immediately understood what it meant. The humans had won, but the Krellith would be back with more ships, more weapons, and a desire for revenge. He sent new orders to Captain Doyen: dig in, fortify the Valorian system, and prepare for the storm that was coming. Doyen gathered his senior officers in the briefing room. The Krellith will return with overwhelming force. We need to turn Velor Prime into a fortress. Engineering Chief Yunji, I need you to work with the Valorians, retrofit their surviving orbital platforms with our weapons. Marine Commander Soman, take your forces to the surface, coordinate with the Valorian Defense Council. If the enemy gets past our ships, you'll be the last line of defense. Yunji was a small woman with graying hair and hands that could repair anything from a communications array to a jump drive. She took a team down to the largest surviving Valorian orbital platform and found it both amazing and heartbreaking. The Valorians had built their station for science and beauty, with observation decks for studying the stars and gardens where plants from across their world grew in artificial sunlight. War had never been part of their design. Can you mount weapons on this? Yunji asked the Valorian engineer she had been assigned to work with. The engineer, whose name translated roughly as Whisper of Wind, made a gesture of uncertainty. We have never built weapons. We do not think in terms of destruction. Then it's time to learn, Yunji said gently, because if we don't turn this station into something that can fight, the Krellith will destroy it and everyone aboard. They worked for 5 days straight. Human weapon systems were integrated into Valorian power grids. Railgun emplacements were welded to the exterior hull. Missile launchers were installed where observation decks used to be. It was crude, ugly, and went against everything the Valorians believed in, but it might keep them alive. On the planet below, Marine Commander Soman faced a different challenge. She stood in the central square of the Valorian capital city and looked at the millions of refugees who had fled from the destroyed northern cities. They huddled in temporary shelters, their carapace shells dull from stress and malnutrition. Children clung to their parents. The elderly lay quietly, too exhausted to even seek food. "How do we defend this?" asked Lieutenant Kwan, her second in command. "We start by giving them hope," Samin replied. She activated her armor's external speakers and spoke to the crowd. "People of Valor, I am Commander Soman of the human military. We have traveled 40 light years to answer your distress call. The Krelith will return, but when they do, they will face not just our ships but our soldiers. We will teach your people how to fight, how to defend yourselves. No more will you be victims. Stand with us and we will stand with you." The translation echoed across the square. For a long moment there was silence. Then one Valorian stepped forward, then another, then dozens more. They were scholars who had never held weapons, artists who had never known violence, but they were ready to learn. Because humans had come when no one else would, and that meant something. The Krelith Armada arrived 5 days later. 40 warships emerged from jump space at the edge of the system, including a massive flagship that dwarfed even the largest human vessel. This was the personal command ship of Warlord Thrax, Supreme Commander of the Krelith military. He had conquered 12 species personally and never tolerated defiance. His message was broadcast on all frequencies. "Humans of Terra, you have interfered in Krelith affairs and destroyed Krelith property. For this crime, your species will be eliminated. Surrender now and we will grant you quick deaths. Resist and we will make your extinction last for generations." Captain Doyen stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, surrounded by his crew. They looked to him for leadership, for hope, for the words that would carry them through what was coming. He thought about everything humanity had overcome. Ice ages and plagues, wars and famines, the long climb from caves to the stars. He thought about the Valorians below, finally learning to fight for their own survival. He thought about the billions of people back on Earth, watching and waiting. "Record this message and broadcast it to the fleet," Doyun ordered Jiwan. When the light indicated he was transmitting, he spoke clearly. "This is Captain Doyen to all Terran Defense Fleet vessels. We came to this system to answer a distress call. We came because it was right, because we could, because we chose to stand up when someone needed us. The Krelith expect us to be afraid. Let's show them what happens when they mistake humanity for prey. All ships, battle stations. This is going to be rough." The battle began at dawn on Valor Prime, so the people below could watch the sky light up with weapons fire. The Krelith came in waves, their ships massive and numerous. The human fleet fought with desperate courage, using every trick and tactic they had developed over 3 months of preparation. Ships were damaged, shields failed, hulls were breached, but the humans held their position around the planet. When Krelith troop transports broke through the defensive line and headed for the surface, Soman's Marines were waiting. The Krelith shock troops that emerged from the landing craft were terrifying. 3 meters tall, covered in armor-like skin, armed with weapons that could punch through reinforced concrete. They had been bred and trained for war since birth, but so had humanity's Marines. And unlike the Krelith, humans fought for something more than conquest. The battle raged through the streets of the capital city. Soman's soldiers used the urban terrain to their advantage, hitting the Krelith from rooftops and alleys, using explosives to collapse buildings on enemy formations. Medic Gion worked in a makeshift hospital in the subway tunnels, treating wounded Marines and Valorians side by side. Artillery officer Kyung Min coordinated strikes from mobile gun platforms, bringing down heavy fire on Krelith positions. The fighting went on for 3 weeks. Ships fell on both sides. The destroyer Busan was lost with all hands when it rammed a Krelith cruiser to protect the Indomitable. The cruiser Jeju was crippled but managed to take 2 enemy ships with it before evacuating the crew. On the ground, entire Marine units were wiped out holding critical positions, but inch by inch, day by day, the humans and Valorians pushed back. The Krelith had never faced an enemy that wouldn't break, that kept fighting even when outnumbered, that somehow got stronger when things seemed hopeless. On the 21st day of battle, with his fleet reduced by half and his ground forces trapped in a killing zone, Warlord Thrax made the decision to retreat. For the second time in Krelith history, they fled from battle. Captain Doyen stood on the damaged bridge of the Indomitable and watched the enemy ships jump away. Around him, his crew was silent, too exhausted to even celebrate. News of the battle reached Earth 6 weeks later, traveling through the network of relay stations that connected human space. The message was simple. Humanity had fought the Krellith Dominion and won. The cost was terrible, but the victory was real. 4 ships lost, 3,000 Marines dead. But Velor Prime was saved. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Every major city on Earth held vigils for the fallen. Recruitment centers were flooded with volunteers wanting to join the fleet. The United Terran Assembly held an emergency session and voted to send massive reinforcements to Velor Prime. 30 new warships, fresh crews, medical frigates, and enough supplies to wage a long campaign. Leading the Second Fleet was Commander Seogen, a man whose tactical genius had been proven in a dozen war games and simulations. He was young for his rank, barely 40, with sharp eyes that never stopped analyzing, calculating, planning. When he received his orders to take command of the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled, he spent 3 days studying every detail of the battle reports from Velor Prime. Then he began planning something audacious. The Second Fleet arrived at Velor Prime 3 months after the battle. Captain Doyen stood at the viewport of the repaired Indomitable and watched the reinforcements emerge from jump space. 30 fresh warships, their hulls unmarked by combat, their crews eager and untested. Behind them came the supply vessels, the medical ships, the troop transports carrying another 10,000 Marines. Commander Seogen transferred his flag to the Indomitable and immediately called a meeting of all senior officers. He stood at the head of the briefing room, looking at the tired faces of those who had fought and bled to hold Velor Prime. When he spoke, his voice was calm but carried absolute conviction. "The Krellith expect us to defend this system and wait for them to attack again," Seogen said. "They think of us as prey that got lucky. They will gather their forces, plan carefully, and come back to crush us with overwhelming numbers. That is how they have always won." He paused, letting his words sink in. "So we will not give them time to prepare. We are going to take the fight to them." Admiral Minho appeared on the holographic display transmitting from Mars Command. "Commander Seogen's plan has been approved by Earth Command. We have identified Krellith supply lines, staging areas, and logistics hubs throughout this sector. We are going to hit them all, simultaneously, and destroy their ability to wage war in this region." The campaign began 2 weeks later. The human fleet split into smaller task forces, each assigned to strike a specific target. Captain Minji of the stealth destroyer Ghostwind led one of these forces deep into Krellith-controlled territory. Her ship was equipped with advanced cloaking systems and could slip past enemy sensors like a shadow through darkness. Tactical Officer Wu Jin monitored the sensors as they approached their target, a Krellith supply depot orbiting a lifeless moon. 17 cargo ships docked at the station. Minimal defensive fleet. Just 3 patrol ships. They don't expect anyone to attack this far behind their lines. Weapons Specialist Nari armed the torpedo tubes. "Ready on your order, Captain." Minji studied the tactical display for a long moment, then nodded. "Fire." The Ghostwind unleashed its full payload. Torpedoes streaked across the distance, each one guided by sophisticated targeting systems. The first hit the station's reactor core. The second took out the main weapons platform. The rest destroyed the cargo ships one by one, each explosion lighting up the dark like a brief sun. By the time the patrol ships realized they were under attack, it was too late. The Ghostwind vanished back into the dark, leaving only wreckage behind. Similar attacks happened across 24 systems. Krellith logistics bases went silent. Supply convoys disappeared. Communication relays were destroyed. The Dominion's war machine, which had operated unopposed for centuries, suddenly found itself disrupted and disorganized. And with each successful raid, humanity learned more about their enemy. Intelligence Officer Taehyung spent his days analyzing captured data and interrogating Krellith prisoners. What he discovered was both encouraging and disturbing. The Krellith Dominion was powerful, but it was also overextended. They ruled 17 conquered species through fear and force, keeping each subjugated population separate and powerless. But humanity's intervention had created something new. Hope. Secret transmissions began reaching the human fleet. Other species under Krellith rule were making contact, offering information about enemy positions, supply routes, and weaknesses. 3 species sent representatives to Velor Prime, traveling in secret through dangerous space. They met with Commander Seogen and Ambassador Yuna in a quiet room aboard the Indomitable. The representatives were different from each other and from humans. One looked like a floating jellyfish. Another was a crystalline being that communicated through light patterns. The third resembled a small bear covered in silver fur. But they all shared one thing: decades of suffering under Krellith rule. "Your victory at Velor Prime has inspired many," the crystalline being said. Its light pulsing in patterns the translator interpreted as cautious hope. "For the first time we see that the Dominion can be defeated. We wish to help, but we have little to offer. Our weapons were taken long ago. Our ships destroyed." Ambassador Yuna leaned forward. "You have something more valuable than weapons. You have knowledge. You know Krellith systems, Krellith tactics, Krellith weaknesses. Help us, and together we can free all our people." Over the following weeks, a fragile alliance formed. The subjugated species provided intelligence while humanity provided military power. Supply convoys were ambushed with perfect timing. Krellith commanders found their communications intercepted. Garrisons on conquered worlds faced sudden rebellions backed by human weapons and advisors. Commander Seojin synthesized all this intelligence into a single strategic target: Krell Station, the primary military staging area for the entire sector. It was a massive complex in a heavily fortified system, protected by dozens of warships and automated defense platforms. Destroying it would cripple Krellith operations for months and save countless lives across multiple systems. "It's suicide," Captain Doyen said when Seojin presented the plan. "Even with our entire fleet and the Allied ships, we'll be outnumbered 3-1. The defenses around that station have never been breached. That's why we need to hit it now," Seojin replied. "The Krellith are regrouping, reorganizing, adapting to our tactics. Every day we wait, they get stronger. Every day we wait, more civilians die on conquered worlds. This is our chance to hurt them badly enough that they can't continue their campaign of genocide." The Allied fleet assembled for the attack. 28 human warships, a dozen vessels from the liberated species, and countless smaller craft flown by volunteers who had lost everything to the Krellith. It was the largest space force humanity had ever commanded, but it was still dwarfed by what waited at Krell Station. Squadron Leader Hana led the final briefing for all fighter pilots. She had become a legend over the past months, with 43 confirmed kills and countless more assists. Her pilots looked at her with a mixture of awe and trust. "This will be the hardest fight we've ever faced," she told them. "The Krellith will throw everything at us. Our job is to protect the capital ships long enough for them to destroy the station. Some of us won't come home, but if we succeed, we save millions of lives. That's what we signed up for." The fleet jumped into the Krell system and immediately came under fire. The Krellith defenders had been preparing for months, and they were ready. Automated gun platforms opened up with devastating barrages. Krellith warships moved to intercept, their formations tight and disciplined, and from the station itself a massive particle beam weapon fired, powerful enough to destroy a cruiser in a single shot. Engineering Chief Yunji worked miracles keeping the Indomitable operational as it took hit after hit. Systems failed, were repaired, failed again. She crawled through burning corridors and sealed breaches with emergency patches while the battle raged around her. "We can't take many more hits like that," she reported to the bridge. "The forward shields are at 15%. "Keep us in the fight," Doyen ordered. Just a little longer. The battle lasted 30 hours. 30 hours of continuous combat where humans and their allies pushed themselves beyond any reasonable limit. Crews operated on stimulants and adrenaline, sleeping in 2-hour shifts when they could sleep at all. Fighter pilots flew mission after mission until their hands shook too badly to work the controls. Marines prepared boarding actions that might never come, waiting for the order that would send them into the station itself. Weapons Officer Nari identified the weakness in the station's defenses, a thermal exhaust port that led directly to the main reactor. It was heavily shielded, protected by defensive turrets, and required a nearly impossible shot to hit. "I can make it," she said quietly, "but I need to get close, really close." The Indomitable broke formation and charged directly at the station, drawing fire from every defensive platform. Shields failed, armor melted. The ship shook with impacts that killed crew members at their stations. But Doyen kept the ship on course, trusting his weapons officer to make the impossible shot. The destruction of Krell Station sent shockwaves through the Krellith Dominion. For the first time in their history as an empire, they faced organized resistance backed by military force that could match their own. Rebellions erupted on 6 conquered worlds simultaneously. Subjugated species that had suffered for generations suddenly saw a path to freedom. Supply lines collapsed. Garrison forces found themselves cut off and surrounded. The Dominion, which had seemed eternal and invincible, began to fracture. Admiral Minho arrived at Velor Prime 2 weeks after the battle aboard a new flagship, the massive dreadnought Unity. He had recovered fully from his injuries during the first siege and brought with him the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. 50 warships, including 8 of the new Dreadnought-class vessels that represented the cutting edge of human military technology. Standing on the bridge of the Unity, he looked at the assembled fleet and knew this would be humanity's defining moment. Commander Seogen briefed him on the strategic situation. Our intelligence indicates the Krelith are withdrawing forces from their conquered territories to defend their core systems. This is our opportunity to strike at their homeworld while they're off balance. Their homeworld? Minho asked. You want to invade Krelath itself? Not invade, Seogen corrected. Liberate. The Krelith government rules through fear and force. If we can break their military power at the source, the entire Dominion will collapse. Every species they've conquered will be free. Ambassador Yuna had been working tirelessly to coordinate the growing alliance of freed species. She stood at the planning table, surrounded by holographic representatives from a dozen different civilizations. We have commitments from 15 species to contribute ships and soldiers to the final campaign. It won't be many vessels, but it sends a message. This isn't humanity conquering the Krelith. This is the galaxy standing up to tyranny. The preparations took 3 months. The fleet that eventually assembled at Velor Prime was the largest military force in recorded galactic history. 50 human warships formed the core, but they were joined by vessels from across known space. The crystalline beings contributed ships that could manipulate electromagnetic fields. The jellyfish-like Aquarians brought vessels designed for electronic warfare. The Valorians, their society transformed by war, sent their own newly built warships crewed by people who had learned to fight to save their homes. Captain Doyen commanded the Indomitable II, a new ship built to replace his original vessel that had been too damaged to repair. Standing on its pristine bridge, surrounded by a crew that was half veterans and half fresh recruits, he felt the weight of history. This battle would determine the fate of dozens of species and shape the galaxy for generations. Marine Commander Soman prepared her forces for what would likely be the hardest ground combat humanity had ever faced. 10,000 Marines, the best soldiers from Earth and its colonies, trained relentlessly for urban warfare on an alien world. They studied Krelith architecture, practiced against combat simulations of Krelith warriors, and prepared for every possible scenario. But everyone knew that no amount of preparation could truly ready them for what was coming. The fleet jumped into the Krelith system expecting to face overwhelming odds. What they found was worse. 100 Krelith warships waited for them, arranged in defensive formations around their homeworld. This was the entire home guard, every vessel the Dominion could spare from its crumbling empire. They would fight to the last ship to protect their civilization's heart. Warlord Thrax, who had retreated from Velor Prime in shame, commanded the defense from his rebuilt flagship. He broadcast a message to the approaching fleet. Humans and traitors, you have come to your death. Krelith has stood for 10,000 years. It will stand for 10,000 more. Your bones will decorate our monuments to victory. Admiral Minho responded calmly. This is Admiral Minho of the Terran Defense Fleet to all Krelith forces. We are not here to destroy your civilization or enslave your people. We are here to end your campaigns of conquest and genocide. Surrender now, and we will show the mercy you never showed others. Fight, and we will do what must be done. The Krelith response was to open fire. The battle that followed was unlike anything in human history. Ships maneuvered in 3 dimensions across millions of kilometers of space. Energy weapons carved through armor. Missiles crossed the void in swarms. Nuclear warheads created brief suns where ships used to be. The Allied fleet fought with coordination born of months of training and combat experience. The Krelith fought with the desperation of a species facing extinction. Squadron leader Hana led her fighters through the chaos. Her squadron now expanded to 36 veteran pilots. They protected the capital ships from Krelith bombers, took out weapons platforms, and provided reconnaissance for the larger vessels. She had lost count of her kills. Numbers didn't matter anymore. Only survival mattered. Only victory mattered. Engineering Chief Yunji kept the Unity operational through damage that should have destroyed it 3 times over. She worked without rest, her hands raw from emergency repairs, her uniform covered in burns and coolant stains. When the main power failed, she rerouted auxiliary systems. When life support failed, she sealed sections and kept the crew alive. She was everywhere at once, a small woman holding a massive ship together through will and skill. The battle raged for a week. 7 days of continuous combat that pushed everyone to their absolute limits. Crews operated on stimulants and determination. Medical Officer Ji-yeon worked in field hospitals aboard multiple ships, moving between vessels via shuttle to save as many lives as possible. She lost count of the surgeries, the casualties, the soldiers who died on her operating table despite everything she could do. On the 5th day, Krelith defense lines began to break. Allied ships pushed through to the planet itself. Captain Doyen led a battle group that destroyed the orbital weapons platforms protecting the capital city. Marine Commander Soman's forces launched the invasion. The Krelith homeworld was nothing like the peaceful cities of Velor Prime. It was a fortress world, every building designed for defense, every citizen a potential soldier. Soman's Marines landed under heavy fire and immediately faced Krelith shock troops in their home territory. The fighting was brutal, building to building, street by street. Human soldiers used every advantage they had, superior tactics, better coordination, and the knowledge that they fought for liberation, while the Krelith fought only to preserve their power to oppress others. Artillery Officer Kyung-min provided fire support from orbiting ships, his targeting systems working to avoid civilian casualties, even as Krelith forces used their own people as shields. "We're not like them," he reminded his crew. "We don't make war on civilians. Precision strikes only." The breakthrough came on the 7th day. Intelligence Officer Tae-hyung, analyzing captured communications, discovered that the Krelith leadership was evacuating their command center. "They're running," he reported to Admiral Minho. "The ruling council is trying to escape." "Block all jump points," Minho ordered. "No one leaves the system until this is over." The Krelith leadership, cornered and facing defeat for the first time in their civilization's history, made one final desperate gamble. They activated a doomsday weapon hidden deep in their planet's core, powerful enough to destroy the world rather than see it fall to the Allied forces. It was pure spite, pure evil. If they couldn't have their empire, they would take everyone with them. Sensor Officer Junho detected the weapon powering up. "Admiral, I'm reading massive energy buildups in the planet's core. If that goes off, it will destroy Krelith and everything in orbit." "How long?" Minho asked. 10 minutes. The command was immediate. All ground forces were ordered to evacuate. Transports dove into the atmosphere, grabbing Marines while under fire. Soman was among the last to leave, refusing to go until every soldier under her command was accounted for. She watched from the transport as Krelith warriors, realizing their leaders had betrayed even them, threw down their weapons and begged for rescue. "Bring them," she ordered her Marines. "As many as we can carry. They're victims too." Commander Seojun made the tactical assessment instantly. "We can't stop the weapon from orbit. Someone needs to go down there and shut it down manually." "I'll go," Captain Doyen said without hesitation. Admiral Minho looked at his finest captain, the man who had led humanity through every major battle of this war. "You'll never make it back in time." "I know," Doyen replied. He was already moving toward the shuttle bay. "But everyone else will." Doyen took a shuttle and a team of volunteers into the Krelith command center. They fought through automated defenses and Krelith loyalists who had stayed to ensure the weapon fired. The countdown continued. 5 minutes, 4 minutes, 3 minutes. They reached the control room with 2 minutes remaining. Doyen's team worked frantically to understand the alien controls while fighting off the last defenders. Engineering specialist Hyunwoo, who had translated the first Valorian message so long ago, was part of the team. He deciphered the shutdown sequence with 90 seconds remaining, It requires a biometric scan from a Krelith command official, he reported desperately.